Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this evening's webinar. I'm Sophia, responsible for curating learning events for UX Spectrum. So located at Door Tower in Bugis, Singapore, Spectrum promotes a learning-focused culture, offers a place for you to work at our premium shared workspaces, and carry out meetings and events all at one place. When we first thought about curating this month's panel discussion, the International Women's Day theme also came to mind. I spoke to Micah, whom I met at Spectrum, and she kindly agreed to moderate this evening's session. So thank you, Micah. And also the ladies on the panel from different sustainable businesses whom I will introduce very shortly. So today's webinar is on sustainability and business models, time for a change. Timely that we talk about the circular business model as we are seeing more widespread adoption in organizations in recent times. So now let's do some quick polls. Okay, if everyone can see the question. So if you can key in your answers. Oh, great. All right, let's give it another few seconds. Wow, interesting result. Majority has no plans, Micah. Okay. All right, let me ask a second question, which I think will be interesting to find out as well. So what do you think is the biggest challenge in adopting a CBM? Is it slow to profit, mindset or resistance to change, a lack of encouragement from the management, or others? Right, so it's now has changed now. So majority says mindset or resistance to change. Interesting. Interesting. Okay. Right, so results, surprise or no surprise, I will let Micah set the scene with these findings. So let me now quickly introduce our esteemed panelists. First up, in sustainable food industry, Murta Goska. She leads the GFI Asia Pacific as acting MD, accelerating the markets for fermentation, plant-based and cultivated meat, egg and dairy through research and innovation. She lives in Singapore, the first country in the world to approve the sales of a cultivated meat product. Her areas of expertise include entrepreneurship, business strategy and development, project management, people management, and philanthropy. Next up, in sustainable energy industry is Sherry Hickok, who currently serves as CEO of the GE Renewable Energy onshore wind business in the Asia Pacific region, where she and her team partners with customers to increase wind energy penetration in some of the fastest growing markets in the world. Most recently, Sherry was recognized as 2020 Women in Renewables of the Year Award recipient by Women in Renewables Asia. Residing in Singapore with her family, Sherry is passionate about her faith, family, health, and making a difference in the lives of others. So next is Susanna Jaffa, the founder of Zarin. Zarin is a media platform and marketplace based in Singapore that champions sustainable fashion, beauty, and business. Susanna herself was a former magazine editor. She's also a photographer and creative consultant, Zarin Studio, for fashion and retail brands. Her passion lies in amplifying businesses, entrepreneurs, and creatives, finding solutions for a better world. Last but never the least, who best to moderate this panel discussion is the Professor of Business Models, Micah Doyer. She's an entrepreneur, educator, and design strategist with a twisted love for numbers. Love that. She's a regular speaker at conferences. She has created many online masterclasses, is a professor at universities and MBAs, and mentor for several startup accelerators. Audience, don't miss out on this opportunity to ask the panelists questions and post them onto the platform here. So they'll be addressed at any point in time during the discussion. So let's not wait any further. Over to you, Micah. Thank you.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you, Sophia, for the great introduction. And the poll was very interesting to hear that many companies actually don't have plans yet to go circular. So hopefully after this hour, we change that mindset and people are like, maybe I should go into a sustainable or in a circular business model. And the idea is that we're going to give you some tips and tricks to how to get started with that. So let's do that, because what I want to talk to you with you about first is actually about stuff. Because let's face it, we all like to buy stuff and we like to buy lots of it. We like to buy the latest and greatest car, the shoes, the phone, because we're somewhat stuck in a system that makes us believe that stuff equals happiness. We buy stuff because we want to be in fashion, but also because over time we got used to convenience. Because I mean, it's logical that you get the new iPhone every time the new release hits the market, right? Or when you get a new contract. Sometimes we also buy stuff just from a sustainability perspective because, hey, let's just replace that old refrigerator because the new one actually, consumes less energy than the one before. And that makes us feel good, right? But actually, if you think about that, it's pretty fascinating because since we got so busy buying stuff, we lost track of what a realistic product life cycle is. We're just simply producing, buying, and throwing away more and more stuff. And not only as consumers, also as companies. Basically, the only way companies think that they can grow is by producing more. Because do you remember these days? I think most of the people here had those cassettes. And when this was a product, the time between the product being produced and it becoming obsolete was way longer than it is today. Right now, by the time something hits the market, it almost immediately gets obsolete. Or do you remember that we were all sitting around one screen with the whole family? And if it would break down, you actually bring it to the repair shop instead of buying a new one. So it's very interesting, right? And almost needless to say that in order to produce all of this new stuff at the rate we're throwing it away, we're using raw materials and fossil fuels like we have plenty. But we're actually wasting natural resources at a speed that we're reaching the limits of our planet faster and faster. I mean, this is a very interesting stat here that is coming from the Circularity Gap Report, a very interesting report if you want to dive into this deeper. And what we see is out of the current business models, only 8.6% actually is circular. That's not a lot. And what's really awful, 2 years ago, the number was 9.1%. So we actually do worse. So think about that because, guys, there is no planet B. We can simply not go on like this. And we really need to do something about that. We need to rethink, redesign, and restart. And I want to take you to a book. It's called The Business Model Shift. This is a book that my team just brought into the market. And it's about 6 ways to create new value for customers. And one of the shifts in this book is the circular shift. Luckily, what we're seeing is that companies do understand we need to shift from linear to a circular business models. We need to make that shift. And how can you actually make that happen? If we look at all the companies that are going through the circular shift, what do they have in common? Well, first of all, of course, it's about getting from value from customers, from stuff to customers to value for both people and planets. And it's about moving away towards the full responsibility for the use of resources, ensuring that no resource, material, energy or water is wasted. So it's not just separating your waste, but really reusing it and reusing it for different purposes, not just throwing it away. So that's a complete different way of thinking. And the companies that are doing that well, what they have in common is they have a very bold vision. They have a very bold vision on how to make an impact in the world. Next to that, they're in there for the long run. Doing sustainability or circularity is not something like, oh, let's do it this month and then forget about it next month. No, you have to be in it for the long run and you need to become resilient over efficiency. You also need to be aware of the fact that you cannot face these challenges on your own. You need to involve your customers and your partners on your mission. And the last one, you need to heavily invest in innovation, both on product as well as business model, in order to redesign the system and making use of the last technology. So with that as the foundation, about speaking about sustainability, about circularity, and what do we actually mean with that, and what is it, and what do we have in common? Luckily today we have this great panel, as Sophia already introduced, with three complete different organizations in three complete different industries, all led by women that we have here in the team, in the panel. So that's really wonderful. And now we're going to listen to them talking about like what sustainability means in their industry, in their business specifically, and what we can learn from that. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to move over to the first panel member, Meerte. I want to start with you. Meerte, you're currently running the Good Food Institute here in Asia Pacific. For those of you who don't know you, can you tell us what are you about? What are you doing?
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much, Maaike, and Sophia for the introduction and for having me on the panel. So I indeed lead the team here in Asia Pacific for the Good Food Institute. And I always say the sole reason of our existence is that we're accelerating the markets for plant-based and cultivated meat, dairy, and eggs, because we believe that a food system without animal protein in it would be a more sustainable, more secure, and more just food system. And yeah, it is the future, we think, and that's why we're working towards it.
And what are the challenges that you see that specifically your Asia Pacific is facing that you want to address as the Good Food Institute?
Yeah, so especially Asia, with rising population and rising middle class, is a big piece of the puzzle in our specific field. So food security is a major issue. And it's going to get bigger because we're hitting 10 billion people by 2050. And we have just not enough lands to grow feed for cattle and to grow cattle and eat the cattle, eat the animals, right? So if you look, for example, at the conversion rate, you need 9 calories of chicken feed to go into a chicken to get 1 calorie out of the chicken in chicken meat. So as you can see, you basically waste 8 calories for every calorie of chicken meat you eat. So this is highly inefficient. And yeah, to be able to feed 10 billion people, we need a more efficient way of finding our proteins. Singapore has realized this, and even more so over the pandemic, with like food insecurity. I would say we're importing more than 90% of our food in Singapore. And there was already a policy 30 by 30. So we want to, as a country, produce 30% of our food consumption by 2030. And yeah, during this pandemic-ridden year, there has been a bigger push from the government towards that. So that is one of the things that we see. Obviously, environmental challenges. Animal agriculture has been declared by WHO as one of the the top 2 or 3 causes for like basically everything that affects like climate change, air pollution, water pollution. So it is a dirty business. And then, yeah, human health. I mean, we all know that COVID is a zoonotic disease, and we had swine flu before. The vast majority of antibiotics that we produce these days go to animals on animal farms to make sure that they don't fall sick. But that leads to antibiotic resistant superbugs, which are actually then killing, again, 500 to 700,000 people a year today. So that is pretty scary, to be honest. So just some of the things that we're trying to solve here.
Just a small ambition there, I can hear. And you also mentioned it's a dirty business. If you look definitely at the traditional way of how food is produced. And there are a lot of really large companies that are sort of like, yeah, we're doing this, and then we'll just look at, you know, the Impossible Burger or those to just do plant-based, and that's going to be enough. But I don't think that is enough. So what can they do to improve their business models for sustainability?
Well, I must give a lot of credits to the largest meat companies actually in the world that are basically all buying into this. So I think the top 5 meat companies have either invested in startups, plant-based meat or cultivated meat startups, or have like diversified their product lines by creating plant-based meat options. And it was the CEO of Tyson that actually said, like, if we can grow meat without the animals, why wouldn't we? So I think there is definitely a clear vision in top level management that there is a need for change and that there's a demand for change, and they're basically diving into this. So that's super positive.
That's good to hear.
But there's still a lot to go, because we're like now 1% of the global like meat consumption is plant-based meat, is alternative protein, only 1%.
Huge market to conquer. The Good Food Institute, you decided to be a not-for-profit organization. And when you look into this space, and often it's like, yeah, you know, not-for-profits, they don't care about money. But I mean, I've been looking on your website and I saw some very interesting details here. Can you tell us more what your philosophy is about that?
Yeah, so I know there's quite a stigma on charities, and honestly, rightly so. Because if you look at the normal distribution of the effectivity, like the impact that charities make, unfortunately, there is like most of the charities are not making any impact. It's really sad, but it is what it is. And there's only a very small percentage that are making incredible impact. And I truly believe that we're in that small sector. And if you then are like crazy impactful, then obviously having a sole focus on making impact, that's the only thing you want to do, making impact. So every dollar we get, we want to make the most impact with that $1. So that's what we're really striving for. And I think that is the way that all charities should work. We have like this graphic where we cut $1 into all these parts, like this percentage of your dollar goes to the science program, this goes to the corporate engagement program, and then there's like 8 cents that we need to raise $1. Usually that figure is much higher. So I think you can be, if you're razor sharp, you can be super effective if you're a nonprofit.
Yeah, and it's also about, like, you know, sometimes they say money is a dirty word in not-for-profits, but it shouldn't be indeed, because the better you do it, the more money you have to actually spend on the cause. And so it's good to see that that's the philosophy that you're going with. Thanks, Meerte, for giving us some insights in the food industry and how that works. Sherry, I want to move over to you. It's a complete different part of the industry, energy. You're running the onshore wind at Asia Pacific for the GE Renewable Energy. Everyone knows GE, but it's such a massive company. Could you explain us a little bit more about GE and specifically GE Renewable Energy, what you're doing there?
Absolutely. Thank you, Micah. And it's great to be here with everybody today. So you're right, GE is a massive company, and I've only been here 4 years and I'm still trying to figure it out some days. So we'll just we'll set that aside for now. But GE is really, our whole mission is building a world that works. And we take on some of the largest world problems and really try to tackle those, primarily in 4 sectors. Healthcare. So if you are in any hospital, you will often see some type of equipment with the GE logo. Just notice next time, and I'm sure you'll spot that. In power, and we're responsible for supplying over 30% of the world's power when we look at natural gas and gas turbines. Aviation, we're one of the top suppliers of all of the jet engines that fly these planes around that we used to be flying on, and I think we're all looking forward to fly on again as we return back to vacation land. At least I'm looking forward to that. And then renewable energy, and specifically, renewable energy is one of the fastest growing places to be right now. And really the pandemic has just lit a fire under the energy transition. So, at GE Renewable Energy, we're proud to supply hydro solutions. So, whether it's large or small dams, onshore wind. So these are the wind turbines you see on land, offshore wind, the ones that are installed in the water, kind of near or far, grid solutions. So really actually bringing that energy from the wind turbine to the actually delivery to your homes or your offices. Wind power, we actually build wind turbine blades. We service all of our equipment with digital solutions that continue to evolve all of the time from a service perspective. And we'll talk about that later when we think about sustainability, even in a unique way. And then hybrids, where we're bringing batteries and wind and solar together to really start to think about how do we create renewables that can serve you around the clock, though the energy source may not be there around the clock. We're proud to have over 49,000 wind turbines built around the world in over 80 countries. And it's really quite exciting that we actually were identified as the largest installer of wind turbines in 2020. So big year, and we're really proud to continue that.
Wow, that is really, really impressive, and definitely more than I even knew indeed.
Yeah.
And you're really taking on the whole ecosystem, if I say, and
Yep.
you're playing a very crucial role in many parts of that ecosystem and many parts of the supply chain that are
That's
connected
right.
with that. And I think you touched upon it already a little bit, because renewable energy, we all like, okay, that's the right type of energy that we need to get. But if you look around and you see still these wind turbines, this hardware basically that produce this sustainable energy. So how does that work? What are you doing within GE to really make sure that the whole process is more sustainable?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you're exactly right, Micah, that it is big hardware. It's a big generator and huge wind turbine blades. If you've seen one on a highway next to you, maybe not in Singapore, we don't see them so often, but if you've been in other parts of the world, I mean, it's really quite amazing. But there are a lot of ways that we're continuing to focus on how do we improve the sustainability, which is really for a lot of it is for us is getting more output out of a single wind turbine, in my example, to really stretch that investment a bit further, not necessarily for the return. I mean, yes, there's the benefit of the return, but it's grabbing more of that renewable energy source at one time to capture more energy. So a couple of the ways we do that is really by innovating to bring larger wind turbines to market. So one of the things we are implementing right now in the field is a wind turbine blade that has a joint. So it's shipped in two pieces instead of one, and it's connected actually at the wind turbine, at the site, the wind farm. And that's something new because you can now access locations that might have really wonderful, we call it the fuel resource, really great winds that you've never been able to actually reach before because the blades are just getting too big. So that's one way we think about it. Another is through digital services. So I touched on this, but all of these turbines are controlled by really sophisticated software control systems. And if you can just continue to learn, and we collect a lot of data, we have thousands of really analytics that come off these turbines, to tweak it just to actually we call it feathering the blade, just to catch a bit more energy. I mean, that's really getting more, again, out of that same unit of measure, that same investment, which is extremely powerful. The other thing, learning from these wind turbines and learning from the software and the data does for us is it actually lets us lengthen the life of the wind turbine. So, these turbines used to be designed for 10 years and then it's gone to 15. Now we have 30-year service contracts, which is really amazing. So that's one piece of equipment that can last that much longer. And the more we learn over time, we can actually alter how that wind turbine is performing so it can last even longer, which is really, really great. Blade recyclability is one to touch on. So one of the things you may not be aware of is something called repowering. So when you think about the wind turbines that were installed maybe 10 years ago, those were the best wind sites. They had the most wind, but those are like teeny tiny wind turbines now, right? And we have these massive wind turbines. So you really want to go out and capture that free resource. So what we're able to do by understanding the loading conditions of those wind turbines is actually go out and put larger blades on it without changing the rest of the hardware, which is really powerful. But now you have all of these blades. And what are you going to do with that? We've just kicked off the first ever of its kind, a contract with a company called Veolia in the United States to recycle the blades to be used in cement manufacturing. And it's really, really cool. 90% of the material can be recycled to go into cement. And not only does it save a lot of the natural resources that you were talking about, but it actually, and which is the natural resources, I have a couple data points I think are pretty amazing, but it also lowers the CO2 expansion by 27% when you're actually manufacturing that cement in the kiln. It reduces the water usage in that process by 13%. And it actually reduces, one wind turbine blade can reduce the coal that's used by 5 tons when it's burning in that kiln. And that you really think about sustainability and helping the environment. So we're excited about all those things.
That is really exciting. And that's that true circularity. It's not only how do you use the stuff that you have and to the maximum capacity, but also because sometimes you do want to replace it because it's more, it will actually capture more. But then if you have that as waste, it doesn't work. And then you're still not reaching your sustainability goals. So reusing it, repurposing it, that's to cement. Who would have thought that? that is really innovative to think that way. And I think a great example on how you need to do this together with partners, as you said. I think it's hard to do that on your own, but together with partners to do. Thank you, Sherry, for all these beautiful insights about how that works within GE and how that works in the energy sector. Moving on to Susanna right now. Susanna, you're in fashion, another industry. I mean, it did come up in one of my pictures, of course. We love to buy fashion and we love to buy a lot of it. And companies can't wait to put their new collection into the store so that we buy even more. But you started a platform that will hopefully do something about that. Can you tell us more about Zarin and about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Hope you're all well. So thank you for having me. So yeah, different industries. Zarin, we are a marketplace and media hub. We are basically a platform that is trying to kind of spark and champion this sustainable fashion movement in Asia. So on the one hand, we have a marketplace. We work with about 45 different sustainable, ethical brands from around the Asia region as a kind of retail and marketing channel. And through our media platform, we're kind of talking about all the different alternatives out there to the traditional kind of fast fashion model. That's, you know, supporting ethical brands, that's thrifting, that's swapping, that's secondhand, that's renting. And we're really just, you know, aiming to be a resource for people here in Singapore and Asia to kind of switch to a more meaningful and actually I think it's a more kind of savvy way of consuming and rethinking consumption in the first place. Yeah, that's basically what we do.
And because you carry a lot of existing brands on the platform, maybe because you want to make that available to everyone, and you have the accreditation that is connected to that as well. How do you evaluate brands, whether or not they're suitable to be on your platform?
Yeah, so I mean, within the fashion industry, and I think within a lot of industries, sustainable has become quite a nebulous term for us. We approach it as a really important issue within the fashion industry because it has inextricable links to climate change. You know, 35% of ocean microplastics are actually from synthetic textiles. That's the stuff that we're wearing. That's you know, could be our other household textiles. And it's actually contributes more gas emissions than the aviation and maritime industries combined. So it's pretty crazy that what we wear has such a massive impact. So for the brands that we're actually curating, we're looking at you know, their individual approaches to sustainability. That would be the fabrications that they're using, the materials and their impact. We look at their own certifications for materials if they claim to have any. We look at their social impact too, because true sustainability in the fashion industry doesn't come without social justice. That is for the people that are actually making our clothes, because historically the fashion industry has been built on a huge, you know, the back of labor exploitation in developing countries, many of which are just a few you know, a few hours from Singapore. So we really look at their approach to, yeah, the people making their clothes, how their clothes are made, with what fabrics, with what materials, their approach to waste management. That is, you know, how they are utilizing things like leftover fabrics, how they are packaging their product, and even how they are designing out waste from the start, which is what I believe is true circularity in the fashion industry, versus continuing to work off a waste-based model. That's a bit of a tongue twister on a Thursday. Yeah, so yeah.
And I also think another trend, unfortunately, that we see is this greenwashing. People just claim to be sustainable. I mean, it's really good to see that you guys dive way deeper than that, and you absolutely look beyond that. But what have you seen about this trend, unfortunately, of this greenwashing and the impact on sustainability efforts?
Yeah, yeah, greenwashing is a big thing in a lot of industries. Sometimes it's deliberate, sometimes it's not, on behalf of both brands. and conglomerates. We actually have a post on our website right now. It's actually in our main header, Greenwashing in Fashion, what explained. It went viral on LinkedIn, and like lots of people from quite a few fast fashion brands read it. So I was like, oh gosh, made some enemies. But the basic premise of greenwashing is when a brand is saying it is doing something when it's not. And they may be saying they are doing something, for profit gain, marketing gain. One example could be, as consumers, we're not kind of taught to read labels. There are brands that, may say that they're creating a recycled polyester collection, which is great, recycling fabrics, etc. But only a small proponent of the fabric content is actually recycled polyester. The rest is virgin. That's the case with quite a lot of the conscious collections and recycled collections you'll see in stores today, which is a bit misleading for customers when they think they're buying a fully recycled product, because they're banking on us not actually looking into the details. To me, that's an example of greenwashing, because the marketing will say, fully recycled collection, or will skate around the fact that they'll just not mention that it's not fully recycled.
Okay. You just, as a consumer, think that, okay, that's all good.
Yeah.
I'm gonna buy this. Yeah,
and in some ways, if you're combining, I find it hypocritical if you're combining, I guess, a partially recycled product with a part, like for example polyester, with a virgin synthetic polyester, because it kind of cancels out the good properties of one. You know what I mean? It's kind of like going to McDonald's and getting a burger but having a salad. You know what I mean? Like
Diet Coke. Yeah. Nothing
wrong with McDonald's. I love a good McDonald's now and again, but only the veggie burger, which they've stopped in Singapore now. I'm vegetarian. So yeah.
And also, I think the other thing is, because as consumers, I mean, we all do look at that commercial and we feel good if we buy that conscious produced dress or shirt or whatever it is. And at the same time, it seems consumers are still so far away from really thinking about their clothes, because it's more like, I just like that color. Okay, if it's made, from sustainable sources, nice. I just like that color. It doesn't really matter where it's coming from. But like, how do you see that trend? Or how do you see that further evolve into the future?
Yeah, I mean, it's a complicated one. As a platform and as a company, we are kind of involved in the business of changing mindsets, which is never easy. Especially from a consumer perspective. I've been on that journey myself in changing how I shop. I used to work in the media industry and magazines. I kind of went through this whole cycle of, learning and unlearning a lot of what I thought I knew about the industry, and also my own habits as a shopper. I think that it's the fact of the matter is, historically, we grow up being marketing sponges, and we absorb so much information from brands around us as to how we should look. And as women, if I may say, I think the fashion industry is notorious for playing off our own insecurities, and for playing off how we think that we should look and feel, and the fact that buying this new $15 dress will make us feel better, and that's just the power of marketing. And I think becoming a more conscious consumer is really just about unlearning quite a few of the things that we've been told, and it's just about gaining knowledge about what's the impact of what really is the impact of what we wear. 80% of garment workers worldwide are actually women, many of which, if you want to Google COVID garment workers, many of which are still being underpaid, brands withholding pay. There's a ton of labor exploitation that is still happening in the industry. Fashion is inextricably linked to human rights, and beyond climate change and pollution, which there's obvious data for. I think that if you care about these issues as a consumer, as a citizen of the world, then I think that making small changes with in how you buy and how you shop, and is ultimately something that everyone can move towards, because it doesn't necessarily mean buying sustainable products. It might mean simply buying less and being more thoughtful about what you buy, because ultimately, not only are we cluttering up the earth when we throw things out, it's also, cluttering up our own lives, essentially, with stuff that we don't need and don't love. So.
Yeah, and I think there's also something to say, and it's also chicken and egg dilemma. Where does it start? Does it start with the consumer? Does it start with the producer? And I think if we look at the three different industries that we have here, I think, Mirte, if you look into the food industry, I think actually the producers are doing a fabulous job to show people there you can actually have a choice, and look at the meat part in the supermarkets today versus 3-4 years ago. It's a massive difference to see meat without meat. I think Sherry as well in your industry, where it's also about like, we're just going to replace the traditional dirty energy by the renewable energy, and then consumers will just have to take it because it just becomes more available. And so I mean, I'm opening the mic for all our panel members right now. What's your take on that? Like the chicken and egg, the consumer versus the producer?
I think it's great if I think it depends a little bit on the industry that you're in. But like for us, I think people don't really change their food behaviors. I mean, I'm an anthropologist, and I think cultural change is very difficult. And then dietary change is like one of the most difficult things to change in people. So we see that we just need to make sure, like, because people they're not going to become all vegan. And even flexitarians, that is definitely a huge trend right now. But people, call themselves maybe quite easily a flexitarian. There needs to be a bigger change to make a difference in the field. And what our theory of change is, okay, if people don't change what they're eating, then we change basically. So then we, as an industry, you basically change what they're eating, because you still give them the opportunity to give or to eat all their favorite meat dishes, but just the way that meat is produced is now no longer using like animal agriculture. So it's either plant-based or cultivated. So I think that is something that it's a bit of both worlds. But for fashion, I mean, it's also something. We still, when you see a friend who wears a nice new dress, you always say, "Oh, super nice dress." But actually, maybe we should say, "You're buying you bought a new dress again," right? It's also maybe we should hold each other a little bit more accountable. I mean, I'm sometimes wondering. My friends are all like very much aware of like sustainability. We just had the elections in the Netherlands. Everybody voted like for the most left-wing parties to save our future. But then they're all eating still meat. And I'm like, well, it's a simple change. And there's so many opportunities out there to still eat your normal diet. Just like exchange the products for products that are better made. So I think it works on both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, and I might add, Micah, I go back to maybe your background in design thinking, and it's really, sometimes I think about, yes, it's very hard to change the consumer. I mean, we can't even change ourselves, right? It's called New Year's resolutions every year. So how do we make it so it's almost like they don't have to make the choice themselves? And I know that's way easier said than done. But for energy, I mean, we can do it by, okay, it's economical, it's more economical, it's there, they can make the choice, and they don't feel like they have to make it because it's naturally now flowing into their system, or it's so obvious it's not a choice anymore. Yeah. And, so I think that's extremely challenging across, the various areas, the industries we're talking about. But I do think sometimes we just have to put ourselves in those shoes and say, okay, if we can't change them, then how do we make it so they're not making a change?
Absolutely. I mean, I remember I just recently only moved to Singapore, and indeed I was like, I'm going to get renewable energy into my house. That was quite difficult, actually, but I managed sort of to get at least the most renewable energy into my house. But it's not easy. And indeed, it's also, I think what you said, Sherry and Mirte as well. I mean, consumers in the end are just lazy, and we're going for convenience. So indeed, don't give people a choice. It's just like, this is what it is. And I think that could really make a difference. And I think another way that makes a difference, because I mean, the topic, of course, it's also talking about business models in sustainability and circularity. And often, I mean, I lived in Silicon Valley before coming here. I mean, there was always sort of almost a clash between doing good and making money. But then the question is, like, is that true? Does that need to be a clash, or can you do both? I mean, and it's very interesting in this panel because Mirta, of course, working for a not-for-profit, Susanna, you just have a startup for profit and it's very successful, and Sherry in this large corporate world. What are your perspectives about that? Nancy. Oh, Sherry, I think Sherry, you go first.
I can go. Yeah, it's okay.
Sherry.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think that I almost liken it, and maybe it's not a great connection, back to what we were just saying about the consumer choice. Like, people, I don't want to say people want to make money, but that's like naturally, like, you have to make something to even just to reinvest, because a lot of this takes innovation and technology, right? So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to want to make money. I think it's, what are you delivering and what is the value you're bringing, and then what you ultimately do with that. So, I think it's just hard to treat that as in my opinion, a black or white, like this is good and this is bad. I think you can probably see examples of it on both sides. And, like Mirta, I think your examples were really great on non-for-profits, where you can say, yeah, it sounds good on paper, but the execution's really poor. They might as well make money and maybe, have more to invest, for example, appropriately. So I'd say it just depends.
Yeah, I think we should definitely use business as a force for good. I think that's the only way, because like most of us just need to make a living as an organization, right? You need to earn money to be able to pay your people, et cetera, et cetera. So it's the only way forward. I think that's definitely what it is. But from an investor perspective, I think it might, like, there's this whole impact investing that everybody's raving about. I'm a little bit past impact investing and think that if you treat your philanthropy portfolio as you would treat your investment portfolio, and you do real due diligence and you really look into this and you find those organizations that are like razor sharp, are super impactful, making like tons of impact, then it makes more sense, I think, to invest your money and make sure that you get market rate returns, and then actually donate part of that or everything, up to you, to do good. I think that if you're coming from if you want to do the most good with your money, I think it's often better to find the best charities who are most impactful, instead of going for impact investment, because when there is when people are also making money, there is a double focus, while a charity can have like a single focus, simple impact. So I think that is where I come from. I'm also running a family foundation, so we did a whole strategy change on this after having these insights.
I think it's a really interesting perspective, Mirta, to hear that, because people are saying, no, we just need to make sure all our investments are impactful. And yes, of course, if you have the choice and both give the same returns, you go for the one with impact, very obvious. But I like it how you say, you know what, just make sure you make that money fast and then put it in something with a good cause, because actually in total you will have a bigger impact. And I think that's the mindset there. I really love that thought. By the way, I also want to encourage the audience, in case you have any questions for anyone in the panel, because I don't see anything in the chat or in the Q&A, feel free to throw that in there. Actually, another question that I want to ask, because close to International Women's Day, we're all women here in the panel, which is really cool, of course. How do you see the gender balance in your industry? Because we see 3 complete different industries, 3 different type of companies. Susanna, how does that work in fashion? I think traditional, we all know fashion, definitely some women involved.
Oh, yeah. I mean, women are the majority of consumers, but in fact, most of the top Fortune 500 fashion companies are run by male CEOs. They are also the companies that have had the most impact on climate change. Here in the more sustainable fashion industry, if we're looking at that side. The majority of companies are run by women, which I find really interesting. The majority of brands that we work with, about 95% of them are female run, you know, small to medium companies. Yeah, it's quite interesting. And another side of this is that the majority of investors and VCs that are investing in companies here in the fashion industry are also male run. So I would say that it is still surprisingly, although women are the largest consumers, it's still a very male dominated industry behind the scenes. And I think that is gradually changing. That landscape is changing, but what it does is it makes it challenging for, say, companies like myself, like Zarin, who are not championing the fast growth, big profit, fast fashion like model, you know, marketplaces like ASOS, Allura, Lazada, which are cheap products, sell as much as possible. That is still the most investable business model because it's fast growth. And that's a perspective for a lot of people in this industry. So yeah, for a company like mine, when we haven't looked for investment yet, but that's something that is always going to be, I mean, we're a profitable company, but it's something that is always going to be a challenge to kind of describe to the industry and to potential partners how we do what we do and why. And I think that the most important thing really from my experience is to be able to use data and talk data, and which is really what you know, people who are investing in companies are looking at, really, the impact, which is ultimately the impact that you're making and the impact that your business can make.
Yep.
So yeah, it's still very male dominated, I would say, but shifting the other way, for not saying that men can't do good in fashion. There are plenty of amazing men running really cool companies. I mean, you might have seen the news about Kering and another company investing in Vestiaire Collective. That was a 178 million financing round. Yeah, Tiger Global Management, which is their secondhand circular secondhand marketplace. So really, really cool. There's so much that's changing, and the co-founder's male, so awesome. So, yeah,
a bit of a mixture. And Sherry, energy. I always see men in Texas walking around if I think energy.
Oh, that's funny. Lots of oil. No, I mean, energy is an industrial industry. Okay, GE is almost 130 years old. Next year it'll be 130 years old. So, you know, we're recruiting from the same pools that other technology companies, industrial companies are recruiting from, which I'm a mechanical engineer by degree. We're still, you know, globally, I believe, graduating essentially at the same ratio, male to female, which is about 1 in 4 or 1 in 5, as when I, female to male, I should say there, when I graduated from college. So it's really actually in so many ways quite sad that though the technology space has really taken off, whether it's on more of the computer and the data oriented side, or even just the hard engineering type work, that it's still highly male dominated. And, you know, we just celebrated International Women's Day with a great global panel with our CEO for Renewable Energy, who's French and was located in France. But we had a very diverse panel from multiple vantage points. And I will just tell you, though we are not where we need to be, because for me, the answer is 50-50. Last time I checked, that's basically the world's population. That's pretty much the only answer we should be shooting for. I feel the energy. Like, I just feel maybe we're hitting a point where women are seeing more examples. Women have more role models. Women are speaking out more. Women are partnering from a peer perspective. I mean, just look at this panel. You know, we're not talking about women's stuff. We're talking about sustainability, circular economy. You know, we're talking about circular businesses. So I just believe that maybe we're starting to hit a tipping point, and that's my hope.
Yes, that's very good. And how about in the food industry, Meerte?
Yeah, so a better story here. So in the alternative proteins scene, especially here in Asia Pacific, we see actually quite a number of women having like leader positions and holding the CEO roles. So that is good and interesting. And I think because it's quite a nascent industry and women got in from the start, it is also there are enough role models for young women to now make the decision to go into this sector. So we're working with NTU here in Singapore, and Professor Chen told me that 70% of his cohort, like his class, is female. So yeah, when these young ladies will graduate, they have all these like amazing startups run by women. Some of the most inspiring and hot startups here in Singapore in alternative proteins are led by women. So I think that is making a difference. They say, right, you can't be what you can't see, but in this case they can see what they want to be. So I think I spoke to a young technologist yesterday that just joined a startup. I had a call actually with Rocket, which is like they're in ingredients, and they're both their CEO and their head of R&D are women. So I think in food it's quite good, in alternative protein specifically. And we did a panel for International Women's Day, and I just reread it before this panel to see like what these women leaders say, like what they felt was the reason that there are quite a number of women in this specific sector. And then I think the overall feeling was that, especially for like more traditional cultures, if women go out and have like a top career, it is kind of like sellable to like parents and the older generations when you're in food, because food has something that's so like close to home, to family. Like traditionally women were taking care of their families, of course, at home, making sure there was dinner on the table. And maybe now doing it in a larger scale, making sure that everybody has dinner on the table by innovating our food system, is like something that people can, like also the older generations can relate to and can approve of such a career. So maybe that has something to do with it. But I don't know. I mean, that's just me being creative and trying to find a way why this sector is like women are well represented. Maybe it's just because we're awesome and we're really good. That could be the case as well.
Yeah, no, but it's really positive, Anit, to see that incline and to see the entrepreneurship, and because there's massive opportunity, I think, in that space. Actually, all the industries had to really see what can we do different here, and food for sure is booming at this moment, which you can see with all the big investments that are going in there as well from a lot of VCs. So we started this panel with asking the question to all the attendees, like, hey, are you planning on going for a circular model, for a more sustainable model? Even though maybe the answers weren't that encouraging yet, hopefully this hour helped everyone. Like, I might need to look into that. So I want to close this panel conversation with a last question.
Mike, there is one question from the...
You actually have seen the question. Very good. I didn't see it yet. So there it is. How does each industry play their role to promote sustainability awareness in a society other than through media platform? And that's the question from someone in the audience. So how does each industry play their role to promote sustainability awareness in a society other than through media platform? Who wants to respond to that? Susanna?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm trying to decipher what that means in respect to how we're promoting sustainability awareness in society other than through media platforms. I don't know if that means I don't know if that was targeted towards me, given that we are partially a media platform.
Maybe Mirte, what's your point of view on this?
Well, I thought it's also like really you're changing by doing. So, I mean, we work with scientists, we work with governments, we work with corporates and startups. So we're really changing like products. We're making sure that there's like knowledge gaps that we don't know yet, that there identified and we find researchers, we have a research grant, are actually going to solve these problems so that companies can use these new insights to make better products. And then, yeah, with better products, there's more uptake, skill goes up, prices go down, right? It's a whole industry. So I think by actually doing things, by making stuff better, and in our case, making products better, yeah, you're not basically just telling the population about it, but you're actually making sure that they can eat it.
And then leading by example through that. Yep.
Yeah. And maybe as the industrial industry here, who would probably really do it leading by what you're doing, I would actually come back that the media is still really important, because just a small example, very intelligent people I talk to, very, very much smarter than me, still believe that renewable energy is too expensive and it'll take hundreds of years for us to get there, and why would we invest in wind? And it's all on the grid because it's subsidized. And so that's where I think media is still required. We still need an education platform, because people just don't know. I don't think people are trying to make bad decisions, but you only know what you know. So I do think, in the right way, we still need to use media as an education in conjunction with, like what Mirta said, doing the real work, because you still need the real work done.
I completely agree with Sherry. Like, knowledge is power, and you don't know what you don't know. And historically, so much information from all industries has been withheld from us. Even, meat. When I was a kid, I grew up just thinking meat came from supermarkets. You just don't equate the provenance behind anything until it hits you somehow. For me, that was because of my career. For someone else, it might be something else. I think that's really important, which is why we put so much behind putting out weekly articles at Zeren about anything and everything, from circularity to, our recycled synthetics, really the future of fashion, to, where to thrift and secondhand shops in Singapore, to interviews with this really cool person. I think it's important to put that information out there so that people can see and learn about the alternatives, and then do with that information what they will, because ultimately, once you know, at least, it's like knowing 2 + 2. We know what it is in that way. Otherwise, through Zeren, the other things that we try to do is we often run quite a few panel talks, to bring together industry experts, to bring together people who run the founders of our brands, and interesting individuals, educators, to kind of talk about key issues. They're mainly free talks, and they were happening a lot in person at our pop-up store, but they're now happening online, so we'll have more of those coming through. I've given a couple of talks in schools about material education and the impact of fashion to kids. I'm really passionate about that, because I think that I wish that I'd known some of the basic things I knew about fabrics and materials when I was a kid, rather than waking up to it in my mid-20s. I truly believe that, like, fashion education should not just be reserved for people privileged enough to study fashion in fashion school, basically, and very basic stuff. But I think it would make all the difference to the next generation of consumers. Yeah.
So maybe that's a nice segue, Susanna. If and to round it up, like what is your practical tip for everyone in the audience? Like, how can you move your business or even your behavior to a more circular, sustainable business model? What is a very practical thing that people could do? What's your take, Susanna?
Yeah, just do some research, like Google around the issues that could potentially affect your industry, and learn. That's Google, that's books, that's there's information, that's YouTube, there's information everywhere, and there's really quality information, not just when it comes to fashion. On Instagram, actually, it's been a great platform for us, and I love it as a platform because there's so many amazing sustainability activists putting out real quality, nuanced information, which I find really enriching. So I think that would be a first port for any business to learn about it.
Educated. That's a very good one. Sherry, what's your tip for everyone?
Mine is just pick one small thing and do it. If it's as simple as swapping out the styrofoam coffee cups at the coffee maker to taking on some big activity, but create some momentum, because energy feeds on energy, and that's positive or negative. And so just start small, pick one thing and ask what you can do to change it, and then add the next.
No need to wait till you can replace the full supply chain. Start
That's
with
right.
something small and get that done, and then we'll work
That's
on
right.
everything.
That's right.
Thank you. Meerte.
I would say stay away from greenwashing. Like, do something that really makes your own supply chain better, like your business model better, your business better, and not donate 5% or 1% to something that you're not related to at all. Like, you have your expertise in your business, so make sure that your business is getting 1 step better, and preferably 10 steps better. But yeah, stick to what you do it best, and do it like because you're intrinsically motivated to do better.
Yeah, and then you can shine. Nice. Thank you so much, Meerte, Susanna, and Sherry, for all your insights. I think that was really great. Sophia, I see you're coming on. We're 1 minute over time.
No worries. I think if we can go on and on, the topic is just to, lots of great insights. So I hope that the audience, like me, have gained valuable knowledge from today's discussion and how we can contribute to a sustainable future. So thank you, Micah, Meerte, Sherry, Susanna, for making this panel discussion a reality. So really appreciate your time and insights today. And yes, you are awesome ladies. So thank you, audience, for taking time to join us this Thursday evening. So do complete the feedback form, which will be prompted after you exit from this webinar. So I'm sure some of you would still have questions for panelists, but we don't have time to do that this evening. So you can connect with them on LinkedIn, or you can go through Spectrum for connection. So I look forward to seeing you at our next session, which is on electric vehicles. Are we ready for the change on 8th of April? So we hope you've received the email invite, and take care, stay safe, everyone. All right, thank you. Thank you, ladies. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.